She blocked the door and said, "You're mine for the night." The building itself seemed alive, its walls smooth and metallic, reflecting soft pools of light that made the corridors feel both enormous and impossibly narrow. He had been invited by the Galactic Observation Council, an alien organization that studied all species in the galaxy. Elias, a human systems analyst, had been chosen specifically for his reputation. Humans were said to be clever but fragile, unpredictable yet adaptable. That, they said, made him perfect for their experiments. As he walked through the long hallway toward the central chamber, he noticed the subtle differences from human architecture. There were no corners. Every wall curved gently into the next, and the doors were smooth plates with no handles, no visible hinges. He pressed a small panel beside the entrance, and the door glided open with a soft hum. Inside, the chamber was stark and bright. A single chair faced a wall that looked almost like glass. Behind it, faint movements suggested someone, or something, was observing him. Elias' gut twisted in curiosity and mild unease. "Welcome, Elias Rowan," said a calm, measured voice. He turned toward it and saw Calith, the overseer, step into the chamber. Calith was tall and humanoid, but there was something subtly unsettling about him. The skin had a soft shimmer like sunlight through water, and his eyes were too still, too precise. "Thank you," Elias said. He forced a smile. "I hope I can be helpful." Calith said nothing, merely walked to the door and without warning stepped in front of it. The door slid shut behind him, sealing with a quiet click. Elias felt the first hint of unease. "You're mine for the night," Calith said, voice calm but commanding. Elias froze. He glanced at the door, then back at Calith. I don't understand." Calith's eyes were steady. "It is a test. You will remain in this chamber for the duration. You will have no contact with the outside world. Sleep will be irregular. Observation will be constant. All other species have failed this trial. Humans have never been tested. Tonight we will see if you endure." Elias swallowed hard. This was no threat, not in the sense of danger. It was a challenge, a puzzle, a trial of mind and spirit. He could feel the weight of observation pressing on him. Every instinct screamed that isolation was a form of control, but humans had something strange, something that others did not, the ability to shape their own minds when all else failed. He nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "Then I assume I will need some basic comforts, water, a chair, light, perhaps something to occupy my mind." Calith tilted his head, surprised. No other species had spoken like this. Most had panicked or become completely still, their minds blank with fear or compliance. Elias' tone was calm, almost conversational, as if he were simply discussing the weather. "You may have water and a chair," Calith said finally, "but nothing else. This is to measure endurance, adaptability, and resilience." Elias moved toward the small dispenser in the corner and filled a glass. He took a careful sip, listening to the soft hum of the chamber's systems. The walls seemed to close in subtly, but he did not flinch. Humans could adapt. The first hour was quiet, too quiet. The only sounds were the low vibrations of the station, the soft hiss of recycled air, and the occasional beep of an unseen monitoring system. Calith did not speak, did not react. Elias decided to start talking to himself, not in panic but in thought. He began to recite details about his life, the city he came from, the star charts he had memorized, the people he loved, the moments he remembered. "Memory," he said aloud, "is a human weapon. We wield it without knowing it, and yet we also hold it carefully. Perhaps that is why we endure." Hours passed. Elias measured time in small ways, counting the hums of the ventilation system, noting the slow changes in lighting. The walls shifted subtly, changing colors from soft white to a faint blue, then back again. He realized that the chamber was not only observing him, it was testing his perception, his reactions, and his ability to maintain focus in a changing environment. By the fourth hour, Calith finally spoke again. You do not appear stressed. Most species would break by now. Elias smiled faintly. Humans are often underestimated, he said. It is part of our design. We survive not because we are strong, but because we refuse to be controlled completely. Calith's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of interest in his eyes. Humans were supposed to be fragile, easy to manipulate. Elias was proving them wrong. Night, or what passed for night on the station, stretched on. He continued to occupy his mind with small exercises, reconstructing the alien station's layout in his head, predicting patterns in the ambient light, and speaking aloud observations about the subtle vibrations in the walls. Each step was a quiet rebellion against isolation. The fifth hour brought the first true test. The room's lighting shifted to a near red, and a low tone filled the chamber, vibrating through the floor. It was disorienting. Most creatures would panic, but Elias closed his eyes, focused on his breathing, and recited a memory of his childhood, a moment by the sea. The vibration did not control him. He allowed it to exist, acknowledged it, and moved on. Calith watched silently, then tilted his head slightly. A subtle acknowledgement, a hint of respect. Elias was beginning to see that this trial was not just about survival. It was about mental sovereignty, the ability to remain oneself under conditions designed to make one break. Hours became longer. Elias lost track of time entirely. When he spoke, he did so to maintain a rhythm, a connection with his own mind. Observation is natural, he said, but I am not merely observed. I am still me, always me. Calith finally stepped closer. You are unexpected, he said softly. We anticipated panic, confusion, despair. Instead, you engage, you adapt, you converse with your own mind. Elias nodded. Humans are masters of adaptation. You cannot own the mind that refuses ownership. You can isolate us, challenge us, test us, but you cannot take us completely. Calith did not reply. Instead, he moved back to the door and blocked it once more. You have endured longer than any other species, he admitted. But there is more to test, more subtlety. The night is far from over. Elias looked at him calmly. Then I will continue to endure, and I will continue to think. You will learn something about humans tonight, whether you like it or not. The night stretched on. The lights shifted again. The hums and vibrations changed rhythm, and subtle, almost imperceptible illusions began to appear in the walls. Yet Elias noticed each one and catalogued them in his mind. He began to speak to Calith indirectly, offering observations and small jokes about the alien architecture. Every word, every movement became a signal that humans were not passive. Calith began to respond in subtle ways, a tilt of the head, a flicker of the eyes, a soft hum. The overseer had expected compliance but instead found dialogue. Humans were supposed to be fragile, but here was one who did not flinch, who did not yield. As the hours ticked by, Elias realized something profound. The trial was not about controlling him. It was about measuring what made humans human, the capacity to maintain identity, thought, humor, and willpower even under total isolation. By the end of what felt like the longest portion of the night, Elias leaned back in his chair. He was tired, yes, but composed. His mind was alert, sharp, and unbroken. He had endured the first part of the trial and in doing so had proven something that would ripple through the council. Humans could not be controlled merely by circumstance. Calith finally spoke again, almost reluctantly. You have surprised us, he said. Few species would have adapted so calmly, so completely. The night is far from over, but you have already begun to reshape our understanding of humanity. Elias smiled faintly. Then perhaps tomorrow the night will not seem so long for either of us. Calith nodded, retreating to the corner. Elias picked up his glass of water, considered the soft hums of the chamber, and settled into his chair. For the first time, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Humans had survived worse, and tonight would be no different. The door was still closed, the lights continued to shift, and Caliph continued to observe. But Elias had found something that no alien test could take from him: control over his own mind. And in that control, humans would always find strength. The night was only beginning. Elias Rowan had settled into the rhythm of the chamber, but the night was far from over. The soft hum of the station was constant now, but it carried new layers: subtle vibrations, faint echoes, and an almost imperceptible pulse in the floor. He could feel it under his feet, gentle but deliberate. The station was alive in a way humans had never experienced, and he knew it was all part of the trial. Caliph remained in the corner, silent and still, watching him. The alien observer had no visible expression, yet Elias could feel its attention like a weight pressing against his mind. He understood now that the challenge had changed. The first hours had tested endurance. The next phase was subtler: perception, judgment, and mental agility. Elias took a deep breath and began pacing slowly, counting each step in his head. He whispered observations aloud. The walls curve slightly to the left. The hum changes frequency every 14 minutes. There is a faint scent, metallic, perhaps from the air filters. He realized this was not a simple test of patience. The chamber itself was interactive. Lights shifted, panels moved, and small illusions appeared in the walls. They were subtle enough to be missed if he did not pay attention. Most species, Caliph had said, would panic. Humans, he thought, had an advantage. We observe, we adapt, we survive. Hours passed. The room's ambient light began to shift in unexpected ways. Panels on the walls seemed to flicker, showing shapes that weren't there, shadows that moved with no source. Elias stopped and focused. "A distraction," he muttered. "They are testing my ability to distinguish reality from illusion." He began cataloging everything in his mind, noting every small change. He drew imaginary diagrams in the air with his finger, as if mapping the room in 3 dimensions. He whispered to Caliph, though the alien did not respond. "You expect confusion, hesitation, yet I remain focused." Caliph finally spoke after what felt like hours. "Humans are unusual," he said softly. "They adapt rather than resist. Most species fight the illusion or freeze. You work with it." Elias smiled faintly. "Observation is key. The mind can be manipulated, but only if it allows itself to be fooled. I will not surrender my perception. Not tonight, not ever." The next test came without warning. The temperature in the room shifted subtly, imperceptibly at first, then noticeably. A chill ran along the floor, brushing against his legs. Elias felt it but did not react. Instead, he adjusted his posture, considered the airflow, and made mental notes. He muttered aloud, "Cold is an opportunity to focus, not a threat. Adaptation is my tool." Caliph watched from the corner, his head tilting slightly. The alien had expected panic, perhaps fear, but Elias only grew more methodical. His calmness was disarming, and even Caliph began to feel something unfamiliar: curiosity. Elias decided it was time to engage the observer more directly. "You have studied humans for centuries," he said, pacing slowly. "You've seen our mistakes, our triumphs, our fragility, but you underestimate our ability to endure mental challenges." Caliph said nothing. His stillness was almost like a mirror, reflecting Elias' words back at him. Elias continued, "You design these tests to control the mind, to see who breaks first. But humans are unique. Our minds can create order in chaos. We can turn pressure into structure. You cannot own that. You can observe, you can challenge, but you cannot own it." The chamber seemed to respond. The walls pulsed, the floor vibrated, and subtle noises echoed in the air. Elias paused, listening carefully. He realized the station was reacting to his words, his voice, and even his thoughts. The test was no longer only about endurance. It was interactive. Hours blurred into a strange, disorienting flow. Elias had lost all sense of real time, yet he remained alert. He sang quietly to himself, simple human melodies he had learned as a child. He told stories aloud, moments from his life, observations about the alien architecture, musings about the stars. Every word, every sound was a signal of life, of humanity, of resilience. Caliph moved slightly, a subtle gesture almost imperceptible, but Elias noticed. The observer was intrigued, unsettled even. Humans were not supposed to behave like this. They were supposed to break, to succumb to confusion or fear. Elias, however, thrived under the trial. As the alien remained in the corner, Elias began a new exercise: pattern recognition. The lighting shifted in subtle sequences. Small panels blinked in rhythms, and faint shapes appeared and disappeared on the walls. He noted everything, repeating sequences aloud, creating mental maps. Each observation was a step toward mastering the environment. "You use logic and observation," Caliph finally said. "Most species do not. They panic or act randomly. You adapt. You manipulate the trial instead of allowing it to manipulate you." Elias nodded. "Every test has rules. Every environment has patterns. Humans survive because we learn to read them. You cannot expect us to be passive." The chamber responded again. Now a soft glow enveloped the walls, creating abstract images that seemed almost alive. Shadows danced across the floor in impossible shapes. Most beings would have been terrified. Elias only paused, studying the shapes carefully, noting their sequences. He began to anticipate the illusions before they even appeared. Caliph stepped forward slightly, lowering his head. Elias could feel the alien's curiosity increasing. "You are persistent," Caliph said. "Unusually persistent. Most species would falter long before this. Yet you continue." Elias sat in the chair for a moment, drinking water and letting his mind settle. "Persistence is what defines humans," he said aloud. "We are not always the strongest, fastest, or most powerful, but we endure, we adapt, we think. That is why we survive where others fail." The next phase of the trial was subtle but profound. The chamber began emitting soft vibrations at irregular intervals, creating the sense of movement where there was none. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in tiny motions. The floor pulsed beneath him, almost like a heartbeat. Most species would have panicked. Elias only observed and adjusted his posture, noting the rhythms and harmonics. "You are extraordinary," Caliph said softly. "You are not merely enduring, you are interacting. You are shaping the trial rather than being shaped by it." Elias smiled faintly. "Humans are not passive. We observe, we analyze, we adapt. Pressure reveals character, not weakness. You cannot control what you cannot touch." Time became irrelevant. The chamber shifted, lights flickered, subtle illusions played across the walls, and vibrations continued in irregular patterns. Yet Elias maintained focus, cataloging everything in his mind, speaking observations aloud, maintaining structure, humor, and thought. Caliph watched silently, realizing something he had not anticipated. Humans were not fragile. They were not weak. They had a unique ability to endure total isolation while maintaining identity, thought, and purpose. No species had ever done this. Elias began to feel a sense of quiet triumph. He had not yet seen the end of the night, but he knew the trial had already begun to shift in his favor. He was not a subject. He was not a passive participant. He was a human. And humans, he thought, thrived where others faltered. Hours turned into what felt like a full cycle of the station's lighting. Elias had lost all sense of Earth time. He continued to talk, to sing, to catalog, to joke quietly with himself. The chamber responded subtly, the station reacting to his mind and voice. He realized that the trial was no longer simply testing him, it was engaging him. Caliph stepped closer once more. "You have endured longer than any species before you, yet there is more to learn. The night is far from over. But already you have changed the parameters of the trial." Elias leaned back, drinking water and letting his eyes drift to the glowing walls. "Then let it continue," he said calmly. "Humans will endure. We will observe. We will adapt. You cannot control what you cannot touch. Not now, not ever. The observer made no reply, but Elias felt it. The recognition, the curiosity, the realization that humans were different than any other species in the galaxy. The trial had begun to shift. No longer was it merely a test of endurance. It had become a dialogue, a challenge, yes, but also an acknowledgement. And Elias Rowan, human systems analyst, remained calm, composed, and completely unbroken. The night stretched on, but he had already won something no other species had. The quiet, undeniable proof that humans were not merely participants in alien trials, they were masters of their own minds. The chamber pulsed, the illusions danced, the floor vibrated softly, and Elias smiled. Humans would survive. Humans would endure. And humans, he thought quietly, would always be more than expected. The night was far from over, but for Elias, the first true victory had already been won. Elias Rowan had survived the night. He had endured hours of isolation, disorientation, and tests designed to break him mentally, yet he remained calm, observant, and fully himself. Every subtle vibration, every shifting light, every illusion that the chamber presented had been catalogued, analyzed, and adapted to. The chamber's walls, alive with soft glows and shadows, had revealed the station's intelligence, but Elias had revealed something far more important, the strength of the human mind. Caliph had remained in the corner, silent for hours, watching. Now, after what felt like an eternity, the alien finally approached. The tall, calm figure of Caliph moved with careful deliberation, his eyes observing every detail of Elias. For the first time, there was something akin to respect in his posture, a soft acknowledgement that the human had achieved what no other species could. "You have survived," Caliph said. His voice, smooth and deliberate, carried a tone Elias had never heard from an alien before, admiration. "Not by luck, not by training, but by choice. You have remained yourself when everything was designed to make you doubt, to break you, to reshape you." Elias stood slowly, stretching his legs. His mind was sharp despite the hours of sensory confusion and isolation. "Endurance is one thing," he said. "Observation, adaptation, and thought are another. Humans endure because we do not rely on being controlled. We survive because we choose to think, even when the world attempts to distract us." Caliph tilted his head slightly. "We expected panic. We expected confusion, fear, hesitation. Instead, you maintained focus. You spoke aloud, you created structure, you cataloged, you played, you observed, and you even engaged with the environment itself." Elias smiled faintly. "Humans are not passive. We turn chaos into order, pressure into purpose. You tried to own me tonight, but the mind cannot be owned." The chamber pulsed softly. Light shifted across the walls, forming patterns that had once seemed disorienting. Now they seemed almost celebratory, as if the station itself acknowledged Elias' achievement. He noticed the subtle harmonics in the vibrations, the rhythmic glow in the walls, signals that Caliph and the station were now studying him in a different way. He was no longer simply a subject. Caliph stepped closer. "You have changed the trial," he said quietly. The night was designed to measure endurance, to see which species could maintain composure under extreme conditions. You have transcended it. You have turned it into conversation, into control. Elias took a deep breath. "You asked a question without words. You wanted to see if I could be forced into helplessness. I was not. I used what you provided, the lights, the illusions, the vibrations, to observe, to learn, to structure my thoughts. And in doing so, I proved that humans do not merely endure. They adapt, we think, we grow stronger under pressure." Caliph studied him in silence for several moments. Then slowly, the alien moved toward the chamber door. The mechanism slid open with a quiet hum, revealing the hallway beyond. Elias stepped forward, expecting the night to have ended, expecting relief, yet feeling a strange sense of reverence for what had just occurred. You leave, Caliph said, and the data you provided tonight will reshape how the Council views humanity. We will no longer consider humans fragile. You are uniquely resilient, self-anchoring, and capable of maintaining identity in conditions designed to remove it. That is rare among all species. Elias paused, looking back at Caliph. Recognition is not the reward, he said. The reward is understanding. Understanding what humans can do when we remain true to ourselves. That is the strength you have seen tonight. The chamber's walls pulsed one final time, soft light bathing the room in a warm glow. Elias felt no fear, no exhaustion, only clarity. He realized that the test, though harsh, had revealed something essential, not about the station or the aliens or even the design of the trial, but about humans themselves. They were resilient, adaptable, and unyielding in ways that the galaxy had not yet fully understood. As he walked through the hallway, Elias considered the implications. The Council would share his performance with other species, subtly altering the perception of humanity across the galaxy. Humans would be seen not as fragile, unpredictable creatures, but as beings capable of endurance, intelligence, and independent thought. That perception alone could prevent future manipulation or control attempts. It was quiet power, but power nonetheless. Hours later, back in a temporary observation chamber, Caliph debriefed Elias formally. "You have not only survived the night," he said. "You have taught us a lesson we were unprepared to learn. Humans do not bend under pressure. We assumed you would panic, fail, or comply. Instead, you engaged. You adapted. You preserved your identity." Elias leaned back, considering the alien's words. "Humans are simple in one way, complex in another. We survive because we refuse to allow ourselves to be completely controlled. Your trial was an opportunity to study that. I believe you've learned it." Caliph remained silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Indeed, the night will be reclassified. It is no longer a test of endurance. It is a study of the human mind. We will now observe you differently. You have changed the parameters of how we interact with humans." Elias smiled faintly. "Then let this night serve as a reminder. Humans cannot be owned. We cannot be controlled. We endure because we remain ourselves, even when the world conspires to take that away." Caliph's eyes flickered slightly, almost like a gesture of approval. For centuries, his species and others had underestimated humans. Tonight, that assumption had been shattered. Humans had endured what no other species could, and they had done so with grace, intelligence, and quiet power. As Elias prepared to leave the observation chamber, he paused at the doorway, glancing back at Caliph. "Next time, do not lock the door," he said lightly, though his tone carried the weight of experience. "Humans do not require confinement to prove their strength." Caliph made no reply, but Elias sensed the acknowledgement. The human mind was now fully respected. The council, the station, and even Caliph himself had witnessed something remarkable, a species that could endure, adapt, and thrive under conditions designed to break others. Elias stepped into the hallway. For the first time in hours, he felt the relief of space unbound. Yet he did not feel triumph in arrogance or aggression. The victory was subtle, quiet, a recognition of human potential and resilience. Humans were not conquerors, nor were they warriors in this trial. They were survivors, thinkers, and masters of their own minds. That, he realized, was far more powerful than any external force. The station itself seemed to acknowledge his departure. The walls pulsed softly, a rhythm in tune with his own heartbeat. The light shifted gently, creating a path that guided him forward. It was as though the station had learned from the night as much as he had. When he finally reached the exit to the main observation area, he paused one last time. The galaxy would now see humans differently. They would be recognized not only for their physical traits or technology, but for something far more profound: the ability to endure, adapt, and maintain individuality against any challenge. Elias Rowan walked through the doors, the glow of the station fading behind him. He had survived the longest night, endured tests designed to break him, and proved something extraordinary, not just to the aliens but to himself. Humans were resilient. Humans were adaptable. Humans could endure beyond imagination. And as he looked out at the swirling stars beyond the station, Elias knew that the night was over, but the proof of humanity's strength would ripple across the galaxy for generations. The galaxy had underestimated humans once again, but never again in the same way. And Elias Rowan, human systems analyst, had quietly ensured that fact. The door closed softly behind him. The night had ended, but the legacy of what humans could endure and the silent respect they had earned would remain. Humans had won. Not with weapons, not with brute strength, not with aggression. They had won with thought, with endurance, and with the quiet, unyielding power of the human mind. The stars beyond the station shimmered, infinite and unchanging. Yet now, somewhere deep within the council, the perception of humans had shifted forever. And Elias Rowan, walking calmly toward the observation chamber's exit, carried with him a simple truth: humans endure. And when we endure, the galaxy notices.